Hey, everybody, welcome here on the Testimony House Network. My name is John Simmons. So thankful you've joined us on another episode of Tell Me Your Story. This is our brand new testimony style show that we've got going on here on the network. We really want to be able to encourage you with the stories of regular people who have met Jesus and the amazing things that God has done in their lives. So we want to thank you for joining us on the program today. In just a minute, we're going to bring Andrew on the show. But if you're watching this and you say, hey, I've got a story to share, I want to share it with you, we want you to email us, info@testimonyhouse.org, or you can find us over on Facebook. Send us a direct message to say, hey, I'd love to share my story of what God's done in my life. This show is called Tell Me Your Story. Just put that in the subject heading and let us know what story you have to tell. Info@testimonyhouse.org, or of course, you can simply message us directly on Facebook. So without further delay, let's head over to the camera screen where I can talk to Mr. Andrew Medlen here on Tell Me Your Story. Andrew, how you doing?
Hey, good. How are you, Brother John?
I'm doing great, and I'm so thankful that I finally get to chat with you here on the network. I've known you for a little while now, but we haven't had too many chances to talk, but you are a excellent man of God, a missionary by your own words and your own description, although I know that you probably are too humble to admit that yourself on the loudspeakers, but you are a man of God, and you've done some great things here in the city of St. Louis that I'm hoping can encourage our audience today. So I know that you had shown me a picture of your family, so let's start there, sort of the idea of who you are and what you're doing here in St. Louis. Let everybody know.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, John, for having me on today. Totally appreciate it. This is my family. We are a wild bunch. That is my amazing wife. She is Adria. We have been married for just over 12 years, and those are our three kids, Judah, Josiah, and Joanna, the three J's. They are the reason I'm going bald, and a ton of fun. And but yeah, they're great. That's our one of our Christmas mailings we sent out this last year. That was a really cold day. It was actually snowing in between there, so but it all worked out.
Well, I appreciate you joining us. Your family is lovely. 12 years married. You're giving me
Thank
some
you.
inspiration here. I'm trying to work up to our 6th year right now. So you've got me beat by double. And I know marriage is hard work. I know that we're here on the
Oh, amen.
coronavirus quarantine, though, and you're a bit of an
It is.
extrovert. And so you're stuck here in the house. I don't want to say stuck, really. You're inside the house with your family and your wife. So how's that been going for you?
I'll tell you, the hardest part is I'm an extrovert. My wife is an introvert. And so her not wanting to kill me is probably the hardest part. I have my home office here and we homeschool. So we're kind of, ahead of the curve on that. We spend a lot of time together. Both me and my wife are missionaries of World Impact. So we tag team in and out. I do homeschool a couple days a week with the kids. And so we're home together a lot, but I do miss some of my meetings where I can get out of the house a little bit. And yeah, my wife, we're probably going to need some marital counseling after all of this being stuck.
Yeah.
But no,
I
we get along pretty good most of the time.
yeah, I'd heard somebody say either we're going to have a bunch of babies in 9 months or we're going to have a bunch of divorces in 9 days. So
Yeah, that's about right. That's about right.
but that's not, let's be serious for a minute because we know that the Lord's in
Okay.
your life and those things aren't really necessarily going to be happening. But what I want to encourage with people today is sort of your story and your history. And you have been a missionary with World Impact for going on 20 years almost. You were telling me, and
Mhm.
so you have a lot of stories to tell, and you have a lot of testimonies that God's been involved with. I'm sure of it. So let's sort of start with the beginning. This is where I just like to let people know, how you met the Lord because it's different for everybody.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in both parents going to church, and I saw my older brother get baptized at church, and I just wondered what that was all about. I was around 7, and I talked to my dad about it one night, and we're old school. He went to the table, he drew the baptism scene like 3 or 4 times, wanted to make sure I got it, and a couple weeks later went forward and yeah, accepted Christ into my life then, verbally, and got baptized, and yeah, really kind of went through the motions. Was always kind of just the good church boy. There were 4 of us kids, and I was a middle child, so I always kind of fell in the middle and wanted to please everybody. And so, yeah, I went through high school and we switched churches in and really got involved with some youth ministry stuff then. Really started to grow in the Lord, had some youth pastors that really poured into my life and got a chance to be involved with help leading some youth stuff then. And um, yeah, so I kind of did that. And then I barely graduated high school and had no idea what I wanted to do. And the majority of my friends went to a Christian college. So, I said, why not? And went to a Christian college there in Manhattan Christian College in Manhattan, Kansas, and started to grow even more in the Lord there, and directed me eventually to being a missionary with World Impact through that.
Yeah. I want to talk about this a little bit because you said something that a lot of people maybe aren't looking for or they don't even know to look for it, which was that, you sort of stumbled on what God had for you. You said that God had sort of pointed you towards
Yeah.
being a missionary. And for some people,
Hmm.
they understand that salvation is important. They understand that going to church is important. They may not understand what it's like to be in such a relationship where you're guiding your future based on what God is telling you. So, can you elaborate a little bit on maybe how you heard from the Lord or encourage some people who maybe they don't know what to do with their life in Christ?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is so different with every single person, And so, in college, we had to do an internship the summer between our junior and senior year, and I thought I was going to do youth ministry at this mega church out in Southeast, one of the like top 10 biggest churches in America. And a month before the summer, my roommate got that job, and I was like, "Oh no, what am I going to do?" type of deal. My next door neighbor was like, "You should check out World Impact," and I was like, "Well, who's that?" And so, but I just needed an internship, so they sent me to St. Louis. Okay, so I'm from North Topeka, Kansas originally. I didn't tell you that earlier, but in North Topeka, it's a unique area in the sense that I would have like at my high school there would be trucks with like rebel flags and shotguns. Okay, and I was pretty sheltered life, and I remember getting off at Grand and 70 in North St. Louis, and wondering what is this place. I had no idea what the inner city was. Part of being with World Impact is you live where you serve. So I actually moved in on the north side, on a street called Hebert off Grand and Hebert, 2 blocks from where I worked there at World Impact. And we were one of the 2%, 98% African American in our neighborhood. And so showing up, I stood out being white. And so it was cool because me and another lady um, we would teach 25th and 6th graders during the summer program all that summer. We'd come home in the afternoon or evening. There'd be kids, youth, all hanging out during the night. It was just totally immersed in the urban culture. I fell in love with it, man. In college I went just for the friends, just for the people. But that was the first time I did something that I was like, this is it, man.
Yeah.
So the summer ended. I went back to college, barely graduated. And 2 weeks after college, I moved back to St. Louis on the north side. And so that's how um, actually saying no to some other things very clearly sent me to St. Louis to do something I never even heard of and just fell in love with it. So it's kind of a crazy series of events that happened.
It's an amazing testimony because, and I see
Yeah,
this a lot, you see this in the Bible and you see this in other people's testimonies, is that when you really take a position in the plans and purpose that God has for you, so often I hear people say something like, well, I don't know if I would have picked that for myself, or I had no intention of doing that. It wasn't a plan that I had. And that's really, you share such a juxtaposition about who you were and how you grew up and then this urban environment that God put you in. But you said, and that you felt like that was home for you. So what was it
yeah.
exactly? Was it the people? Was it the atmosphere? Was it your giftings? Like, how do you know that that was what you were supposed to be doing?
Yeah, for me, it was part of just falling in love with it, and it was something out of totally norm that was way different. For me to be part of the 2%, to go to a culture that is totally not my own, and to be accepted as much as I can, being a white person, to feel the community in one of the roughest. Okay, St. Louis is generally the roughest city in America, right? Most dangerous city. And we were on the worst zip code in the most dangerous city,
Hmm.
right? So it was stuff all around us. It was totally out of my norm. I totally felt uncomfortable so much. I did not learn this stuff in my Christian college classes, okay? But it was just something about it, the love, the community that I felt in being in that neighborhood. It was just something I've never experienced before, and I had to have it. And also moving and being a part of the community, it wasn't their problems anymore. It wasn't their issues. It was now my problems. It was my neighborhood. It was when I go out of town, I'm telling my neighbors that I'm leaving. We're looking out for each other. They're definitely looking out for me. It was the best sense of community I've ever been around, of where I've ever been in my life. And so it just drew me in. I learned more about what the gospel was supposed to look like, how the church was supposed to act, I thought. And I was just hooked. I was just hooked.
Yeah. You had mentioned the word neighborhood, and I don't know if you can tell, Andrew. I've got my Mister Rogers shirt
Oh,
on.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, you are special. And you had mentioned, because you're my fellow Mister Rogers aficionado, you got the mugs and the T-shirts and the pillows and everything else, just like me. And so I really appreciate that, because one, you exhibit a lot of the things that he did, which is just loving other people regardless of where they are, who they are, where they grew up. And for you, you weren't just sort of pigeonholed in the ideas that Christian Bible College had given you. You said, really, I have a worldview now that I'm sort of out on the field and I'm doing things, and you're able to still share that heart of Christ, just like Mr. Rogers did. And I really appreciate that about you, because you are a real, direct and authentic person in regards to how you interact with other people, and that's something that I'm sure is very helpful on the mission field. In fact, you were telling me a story, and we have a picture here about some people who were, instrumental in, in you being involved in their lives. Can you tell us a little bit about this
Mhm.
family?
Yeah, so this is, my wife, she came, she's been here for like 12 years, so she's a veteran in her own right. And we met, through World Impact, and she's the finest missionary wife you'd ever be around. But this is a family that's near and dear to us. These kids grew up in our Bible clubs right on the block. We would have it in our backyards. Um, the the young lady sitting holding the baby on the couch, that's not my wife. Her name is Lanisha. First met her at one of our second church plants when we were doing the youth there and the Bible clubs. And she'd come, and she was in junior high. And I gave her the nickname Miss Addie. Her attitude was through the roof, man. And she didn't know how to receive love. She knows she wanted it. You could see it with all the attitude, and but she was always standoffish. But we just had a real special relationship, and my wife Adria just really developed a unique relationship with her. Kind of took her under her wing, took her, started mentoring her, doing a lot there, and then. When she was 16, she became pregnant, and it was cool because Lanisha wanted Adria to be the one in the hospital room. So Lanisha has had two kids, and we've been able to maintain contact. But Adria was in the hospital room, cut the umbilical cord on both of those kids, and it all happened because on the block we lived in proximity, we were neighbors, we were friends, we were the ones that showed them love because honestly they came from a pretty crazy household that there were so many kids in the household that they didn't receive a lot of that attention that we could give them. And so just developing those friendships and the relationship through the years, and to have my wife, to be in a hospital room with that, one of the most pivotal times in a
Yeah.
person's life with new life coming as a baby, it was such a joy. And she's just been able to do that with a couple girls actually. So just things like that, that you never really plan on, and
Right.
you don't know what you're doing at the time, but it's developing those really deep relationships, and you get to experience some of those times in lives that are really really special. So
It's an amazing story. that you and your wife have, missionaries in the St. Louis area. In the midst
Yeah.
of your missionary work. Of course, Ferguson happens, and then more recently the Pray for the Lou stuff that you've done alongside Kurt
Hmm.
Wilson, where you guys have been
Yeah.
walking the streets of St. Louis every weekend, praying for it. And of course, it culminated a few weekends ago in the Pray for Lou Day, which you had your hand involved with in a mighty way. So tell me
Hmm.
what it's like from your perspective, from going from a person, not necessarily in the St. Louis area, you were somewhere else. Maybe you had a reputation or a thought of what you thought St. Louis was like. You come here, your wife gets drawn here with you, and here you are serving for all these things, and you have sort of these events take place. And so what's
Hmm.
your take, or what's your on what God is doing here in St. Louis and why you're glad to be a part of it?
Oh man, that picture of Kurt, that brings back a good memory. We prayer walked all 79 neighborhoods, 5 a week, and that was one week we decided we were downtown. We would pray scoot, so we got to get those line scooters and drive. I think we drove around more than we prayed that day. I was praying at least, but that was a fun day. But yeah, we were debriefing this last week about Pray for the Lou and just what it's meant, just being in St. Louis for 19 years. And we know the divisions that are here. We know the churches, division racially, division with the churches, division with classes, everything. It's such a divisive city, and we stand on shoulders of men and women of faith that have come before us, that have prayed and prayed and prayed, and they've never got to see some of these amazing things that we get to be a part of. To be alive in St. Louis during this time is crazy. So, with Pray for the Lou, the fact that we were on the Delmar Divide, for those of us in St. Louis, we know what that is. The fact that we could be there in the rain during Corona was just getting ready to start, but I told Kurt this last week. I said that day of that event, to see that many churches, that many races, that many people in the really cold day with all the craziness going around, that was one of the best single days of my whole ministry career. I mean, you just plow this soil, plow, plow, plow. Sometimes it's like, what are we doing? Like, are churches ever going to come together? Are people ever going to stop with the violence and all the craziness? And so the favor that Pastor Kurt has had, and now moving forward, all these relationships with these churches, man, and it's built on we just were obedient with praying. Like the Lord's really working. It's funny. I was talking to my wife, and I tend to get a little crazy at times, but I say, maybe the Lord stopped everything just the time that we could get Pray for the Lou Day, and then everything went crazy. Maybe He just held it off long enough for us. And so yeah, to be with Pastor Kurt and to hear his vision. His vision is to unify the Church of St. Louis through prayer. And what a good thing to get behind. And just to pray with Kurt for over 2 years now. Nobody believed in Pastor Kurt back in the day. Nobody was saying yes to him. The first time I met Pastor Kurt, he told me about his vision, and he wanted to pray on a Wednesday at noon just to start, see what would happen. And I said, when are we starting?
Mm-hmm.
And we started the next week. He just needed somebody to say yes to him. So many urban leaders and urban pastors, they have these wild dreams, they have these wild visions, and they've been told no, no, no so many times. They just need somebody to come along and say, yes, let's do this, and that's all I did. We prayed. That's what we did. I mean, there was no budget with that. There was no fancy building. We just did what the Lord called us to do. And now you saw, man, you were there. It was a crazy good event.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't know 75% of the people at least, but now moving forward, they're with us. It
Yeah.
was, I truly thought it was the get in moment, like the few, the strong, we were there, and
Yeah.
it was the real Church of St. Louis, man, it showed up. So,
Yeah, it was a spectacular event, and really because
yeah,
it connected people who aren't normally connected, and I think that stems to
right.
relationships. It's a word you just mentioned. Is all about relationships, whether it's our relationship with Jesus or our relationship with our church or the people outside the church or relationships with anybody really. And I think this is
Yeah.
something that you've been able to through your history here in the city, and I'm sure since you've been born again that God's really put on your heart other people, and I really appreciate that about your story. If we have some more people we can talk about, another relationship that you formed, is this something you can elaborate
Yeah.
on? Yeah.
Yeah, so this family is very near and dear to us. The young brother in the cap and gown there is named Stefan. This is their entire sibling group. They're from North City as well. They were in part of our Bible clubs just by being on the block. They lived a few blocks from us. They were part of one of our church plants. And this is the family that didn't have the dad in the home. And tragically, their mother left them when he was in junior high, just left out of the blue. They were living in a hotel at the time. The mother never came back, and
Hmm.
they didn't know where she was at. And so we kind of took them under our wing. This was a family that would come to our house during Thanksgiving and Christmas because they just didn't have other family. We'd always just try to just keep them going, keep them in school, keep them living at a place, keep whether it's at this transition house over here or whatever. I mean, it was constant turmoil, and it was pretty much survival mode. But Stefan, he broke the mold. He graduated high school. He went to Mizzou. He graduated with a degree in IT there. He's back. He has an IT position now. He's, has a good job. Steven, their brother, he's working. Kim's had a couple kids. There's a couple of them are still in town, but we talk to them regularly. They're part of our family, that, but just seeing people like that who you just they just barely got them through, but it was we just played a small role in their life, and to see them succeed, man, and that's what it's all about. It's not about hundreds of thousands of people. These are the people that you'll never know about. Stefan is that young guy who said, man, I'm gonna do this, and he didn't let anything stop him. It was hard. I mean, it was hard going to college, and it's hard trying to get a job and pay bills. He didn't learn any of those things, right? So this is he's learning these things as an adult, but he's doing it. He's doing it, and just so proud of people like that.
We got some comments over on Facebook. Andrew, people listening to your story today. Lori's giving you the praise signs here, if you can see it. She's giving you the praise
All
hands.
right, thank you, Lori. Amen.
Freedom over on Facebook, who was there at 314 Day with the rest of us. Drew is the real deal. A few times I've been around you, I can truly tell you care for people. That's very true, and it's something I want to talk about for just a second because you talk about loving other people, and you had mentioned, just sort of giving a yes to Kurt. You had mentioned helping out these
Mhm.
families in different ways, even being in there in the hospital, when they're giving birth, and all these different things that you're doing just to love on people. That doesn't come so easy for most of us. Most of us, it's a hardship to get out of our own bubble, get out of our own space, and say, you know what, I'm going to help this person. I'm going to give this person more attention than I'm giving my family just for a moment, or more than I'm giving my work just for a moment, so I can, focus on them. And it's what Christ teaches us to do, but it's not necessarily easy. So, how is it for you that you've been able to manage that love so efficiently? Oh, we lost
Yeah,
you.
it
Okay,
cut out there a minute, but
that's
I
good.
think I got. Are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. So I asked you, how do you manage to love so efficiently?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, it was just being with World Impact. Our at the end of the day, our main purpose is we want to empower urban leaders. And so to empower somebody looks different than doing the work. Okay. So when I live in the communities in which I serve, I don't have the mentality that I'm bringing Jesus into this neighborhood. I'm the savior. You need to do what I'm going to tell you to do, and I'm going to come in and do that. And that some people are called to do that. What I believe in is, and specifically with World Impact, we want to empower the urban poor. We believe that the neighborhoods are going to change by the people that are already in the neighborhoods. That does not mean that we're going to do the work. That does not mean that we're going to come in and have our way. That means how can I come along beside the people that are already there, the gatekeepers of the community, the people of peace? How can we come along beside them through the local church that's already there, or to help them help start a church. And so that's a lot what we do. Is our my role is a Barnabas. It is not to come to do the work. It's to come to find those Pauls, keep them out of some trouble, because Paul would have got to a lot more trouble if Barnabas didn't come around. Go to bat for them when nobody else would go to bat for them. Pour into them, pray for them, encourage them, and then get out of the way. The inner city is going to change with folk, men and women that are already there that can lead their neighborhoods back for Christ. It's not going to happen with an outside program coming in. It's going to happen with the folk that are already there. And I believe in them. That's why I go to church where I go there. That's why I do what we do. Like, it's very clear what we do. I'm not going to do the work. That's my Pastor Bird right there. Faith Community Bible Church. He's one of the finest urban leaders you'll ever meet. I'm not coming for his role, but my role is to encourage him to hold up his arms, just like the guys did with Moses, to be the Barnabas. I meet with him every Friday morning, and it's my job to ask him the hard questions: how he's doing, how he's loving his wife, how's he's being as a father, because he has the hardest job in the world, to be a pastor in an urban setting where you don't have a lot of funds, where you have to, and everybody's there. We're urban. We're all jacked up, and he's trying to keep us all in line, and so it's our urban pastors, and they're our heroes, and to come along beside them to help them do what God has called them to do, that's my role. And so I'm never in competition, and it's a different way to do ministry. It is, but it works. And it's not for everybody, because a lot of people want to do the work. It's not a sexy ministry. That'll wear off. It's a calling that we've specifically been called to, and I'm grateful to be a part of it. And it just fits my role and personality just to a T. So and I had to fight that, but it's been a really good transition when I got clear and on that. So
Yeah, I don't think many people would hear your sort of you have a neutral tone when you talk sometimes, and I don't think they would. That doesn't necessarily scream extrovert, but yet you have this ability to be able to love and be around people. And when you're interacting, I see this joy and this. You're not one to generally talk too much about yourself, which is one of the reasons you're so successful as a missionary, I'm sure. And one of the things that I want to talk about, in addition to your just home family life, is that you have this beautiful family, and you've a fostered children, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
sure, yeah. So when me and my wife got married over 12 years ago, we both of us had a heart to adopt. That was our first option. We were very clear on that, but it would be down the road. We went to Judah, my oldest son there, and so we went to a quarterly event here for church planters. I was actually at the Journey Church that time, and we showed up, and I don't even remember what the topic was on that day. But the sponsors that day, they did a 5-minute breakout. They sponsored a deal for lunch, so they got to share for 5 minutes. And it was Emily from One Heart Family Ministries here in St. Louis, and she starts talking about adoption, and kind of jokingly, I leaned over to my wife and I said, "I think we need to adopt." And she just looks at me and just starts crying, and I'm like, uh-oh. so we went home so we went home, and I'm like, what's going on? Because my wife, she's not a big crier. That's just not her deal. And she said, well, the Lord told me about a month ago that we were supposed to adopt, and I didn't share it with you. And she said, God, if this is from you, you got to convince Andrew. And so, man, so I said, well, I guess we better be obedient. And we also found out that day there were like 3,000 kids in the foster system here in St. Louis. And like 1,800 of them or something around those lines were ready to be adopted. And once we found that out, we were just like, okay, man, that's the route for us. We got to do that. So we went through all the training. Crazy set of events happened with how we got Judah into our lives. But yeah, Judah came into our lives when he was about just over 2. And we haven't had the rough adoption story with him. It was always like it's always been a really good fit in our family. Out of all of our kids, he's most like me. So we really get along, and we really butt heads at times, but we're like exactly a lot alike. So we get to bring him to a lot of ministry events since we homeschool. But we still his father's non-existent, but his mother's in prison, and we have a very open relationship with her. And once you adopt, your family, if you're open to it, just expands. So we've got to meet an older biological brother, an older grandma, some members of his family. And so there's no clean way to go about it, but we just, nobody wants to have their kids taken from them. And so we've always wanted to have a relationship, and just, man, your family's gotten bigger now. But yeah, Judah being in our lives, and adopting through the foster system was a huge, huge blessing for us, man. Just totally an advocate for adoption.
Yeah. You've shared a lot of testimonies today, and all of them are very poignant, especially in a time like this where the sort of the world seems like it's going mad and it's going crazy, but we have this through line of Christ in the hearts of every believer that we can, sort of pull on to say, okay, well, he's in charge, he's in control, no matter what it looks like, no matter how we're feeling. Christ is at the head of all this. So as we leave here today, I would like to encourage someone who, maybe they don't have the testimonies that you've had, they don't have the fruit to say,
Mhm.
you know, Christ is real in my life and I've seen evidence of it. And what would you say to someone who maybe isn't to a point where you are, doesn't have these testimonies, but you want to encourage them that Christ is real and he's for them?
Yeah, amen. That's a good word. I'm just reminded of that song Waymaker, and like the bridge, it talks about even when I can't see that you're working, even when I can't feel that you're working, you never stop working, and I think you just have to, sometimes you just have to maintain, you just have to keep going, you have to be solid and secure with what the Lord's called you to do, even when nobody else is doing it, even when you feel crazy, even when you don't have the cheerleaders, even when you're not having the success stories, you just keep doing it. If God's called you to that and you're very clear on that, even if you feel a little bit crazy, find one or two people that can support you, that can come around you, that can uphold you in prayer, that have like-minded heart, like-minded vision. Plug in tight to them, but keep going. Do not stop. His word will not return void. We're promised to that. The gates of hell will not prevail against the church. We're solid with that. There's no reason. The time is now. Like, this is the time of harvest season, and you got to play your part. I believe the Bible is the epic story of all time, and we get to play our part in that story. And I need you to play your part well, and you need me to play my part well. Whatever your part is, you got to play it, man. So just keep going, men and women. We need you. We need you to play your part well.
And encouraging words. It's all about the story, as he said. So, as Andrew has shared his story with us, we want to encourage anybody. If you're watching this or you know somebody who has a story that might be encouraging to the rest of us, we'd love to hear their story. Send us an email, info@testimonyhouse.org, or you can message us directly on Facebook or send us a comment on YouTube. Let us know. We don't know what your story is, but we know we want to share it because God's done amazing things in the lives of his people, but not always do we get to hear them. So, we're trying to produce an opportunity for people to share their story, just like Andrew. So we want to thank you, Andrew, for being on the show today with me.
Thank you, John. Totally an honor, really. Thank you so much.
And hopefully we get to do this coming up and we have some more awesome testimonies to talk about.
Amen. I look forward to it, brother.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time. And for everybody watching here today, of course, as always, we pray that you discover a future and a hope for your life today.